Hello everyone, welcome back to my YouTube channel. My name is Alfan Fajar and my student ID is B1024201005 and I'm from Management International Class Batch 2020. And in this video, or the purpose of me presenting in this video, is to sum up all the chapters that I have learned in the HRM class with the lecturer who is Mr. Adi Mursalian. So first, I want to say that I always attend the HRM class every week, the Zoom meeting class. And the reason why I always attend the Zoom meeting class of HRM is because I know that by studying human resource management, I can get several benefits, like it can help me to develop a strategic approach to recruitment, training, analysis, and every other aspect of HR. And by learning HRM, I will also gain more exposure to the design, process, and execution of such strategies in a global scenario when I become a manager in the future. So this class is very beneficial to me. And there are 6 topics that have been discussed so far before the midterm exam, and I'm going to talk about all those topics. The first one is the chapter 1, which is the human resource in organization. So in this chapter, I learned about the basic of HRM from its definition, the 7 categories of HR, and how a corporate culture related with the HRM process, the competencies required to become an HR, and the function and role of HRM, the challenges that HR is facing in the present and in the future, and how technology have changed how HR doing its work. And the second chapter, or the chapter 2, is about the strategic HR management and planning. In this chapter, I learned about what strategic planning is, the process of strategic planning, the difference between strategic planning and the traditional planning, and how the strategic planning is having a big role in doing a company's business. And the chapter 3 is about the equal employment opportunity, or EEO. In this chapter, I learned about what EEO is and how important it is for an organization, and how the sexual harassment is being one of the biggest problems in an organization, and how EEO is doing its role in overcoming this problem, as well as the other problems such as the discrimination at the workplace. I also learned that there are some types of sexual harassment and how can we treat an employee with disabilities in our organizations. And I also learned that in running an organization, it is not only about how I can have employees to work with me, but also how I can give all the employees the equal or the same opportunity in my company. And chapter 4 is about the workers, jobs, and job analysis. And in this chapter, I learned how important work-life balance is for a worker, and I also learned that if I become a manager one day, I should pay attention to my employees' work-life balance in order to maintain their productivity. And I also learned that in having workers, I should make my workplace to be a diverse one, since it can create some big positive impacts to my organization. I learned about the 7 types of workers and the classifications of workers in an organization. And I learned about what job design is and what are its benefits to my organization. And there are also types of workers in a firm and the importance of jobs and work scheduling and analysis. And the chapter 5 is the human resource planning and retention. And in this Chapter 5, I learned about what human resource planning is and the process of HR planning, and also retention and its definition, of course. And there are 2 types of workforce, the internal and external one, and how to assess them. I also learned about how to forecast and estimate the HR and labor demand and supply, and there are 3 major factors that affect how an individual or a worker perform in a company. In this chapter, I also learned what job satisfaction is and how to make sure our employees or my employees are satisfied with their job and how the company treats them. And the last chapter is the chapter 6, which is the recruiting and labor market. And in this chapter, I learned about what recruitment is and how important recruitment as one of the HR's role in a company, and the essential concepts of recruitment and the methods of recruiting employees in a company. In this chapter, I also learned that there are 2 types of job seekers, which are the active and the passive job seeker. And there are also several considerations in recruiting the applicants. I also learned in this chapter why in a small firm it is more challenging to do the recruiting, and there's also a new way to do the recruiting using the technology, or sometimes it is called as the e-recruiting or the internet recruitment method that has some advantages and disadvantages. And this chapter also talks about how to make an effective recruiting advertisement. And in sum, from all of those 6 chapters, I have learned how to be a good HRM, or the human resource manager. And I always give my opening comments during the class and my current knowledge about the chapter in that week that was going to be discussed every week. And my opening comments are generally my expectations of the chapters that was going to be discussed in that Zoom meeting. And one of the questions that I have answered is about the difference between the traditional and strategic HR planning. So the difference between the traditional and the strategic HR planning is that the traditional HR departments more focus on managing their labor relations and focus to how to solve employees' problems and generally just keeping the staff to stay happy in their organization. While the strategic HR planning, this one has plans for helping the organization, has plans to recruit more workers, to develop their talents, and how to train their employees in company standards and principles. So that is the difference, the basic difference of traditional and strategic HR planning. And the other question that I have answered during the class is about what kind of HR planning the companies in Pontianak are using. So my answer was that it depends on the company. For small company or small business, or we can call it as UMKM here, they tend to use the traditional HR planning. And the bigger companies like the state enterprise business or BUMN or other big private or governmental company, they tend to use the strategic HR planning since they are running its business using the newest and latest method of strategic HR planning. And I have done all the video recording of the HRM class, and there are 6 chapters that I have done the video recording. The first chapter is the human resource in organization. The second is strategic HR management and planning. The third chapter is the equal employment opportunity or EEO. The fourth chapter is workers, jobs, and job analysis. The fifth one is the human resource planning and retention. And the last chapter that I have done the video recording is the recruiting and labor markets. And I'm going to put all the links of my video recordings of those 6 chapters on the description below. And my impression of joining the HRM lecture, I feel like the HRM lecture that I take is really a good way to learn HRM. And the way the lecturer, who is Mr. Adi Mursalin, delivered the lecture is making us, the students, to be active in the class. And this class is actually gains the engagement between the students and the lecturer. And the class is really attractive and also really interactive because it gains so many engagement between the teacher and the student. And there are so many advantages that I got from this class. First one is I get to gain my English skill, of course, because the class is held in English. And then I also got to be active in the class, which I don't get in any other classes. And the class has made me become braver to deliver my opinion in an online class. And the biggest advantage, I think, is that this class has really taught me about the HR in a really good way that I can understand the first 6 chapters of the HRM class. And now I am going to talk about the things that are related to HRM theories. First, I'm going to talk about how do I do the recruiting using spatial technology. So the internet can be used to advertise our job vacancies. And applications are often filled out using an online form, and a database from an online form can be used to store information on candidates who are applying for positions within my company. And video conferencing such as Zoom meeting or Google Meet or Skype on a PC or smartphone could be used to conduct interviews with the applicants. And several special internet tools that can be used as part of recruiting efforts are blogs, e-videos, and Twitters. I'm going to talk about the first special internet tools, which is the blogs and recruiting. So it has been used by several companies, several big companies such as Best Buy, Microsoft, Honeywell, and Manpower. And for example, in using the blogs and recruiting is by describing the job openings and recruiting needs on the Best Buy blog. So this example comes from the Best Buy company, and it has resulted in individuals responding to job areas such as finance, marketing, HR, and other specialties. And numerous other employers have used blogs to generate recruiting results as well, not only Best Buy, Microsoft, Honeywell, and Manpower. So there are any other several companies that have used the blogs and recruiting method. And then the second method is by using the electronic video and recruiting. So actually some firms use videos to describe their company characteristics, job opportunities, and recruiting means. And there are several suppliers that provide service for other companies if they want to use the e-video recruiting, and those suppliers are like Monster.com and Career TV. And then the third or the last one is recruiting through Twitter. So Twitter is actually one of the social media, and Twitter actually can be used for many different purposes, such as personal, social, legal, and employment related messages. And recruiters send tweet messages to both active and passive job seekers, and then follow up with longer emails to computers, personal contacts, and other actions to facilitate recruiting. So the recruiters not only use Twitter to recruit their employees. And there are some advantages and disadvantages of internet recruiting. First, the advantages is that many employers have saved money using internet recruiting versus other recruiting method, or like the traditional one, like newspaper advertising, employment agencies, and other search firms, and all of which can cost substantially more. So another major advantage from internet recruitment method is that a very large pool of applicants can be generated using internet recruiting. And jobs literally are posted globally, so potential applicants in other geographic areas and countries can view job openings posted on the internet. For example, if I'm in Indonesia and I open a job recruitment, so people who comes from other countries can also apply for it, because internet is an unlimited place. And it actually also improves the ability to target specific audiences, including the ability to get more diverse persons through the use of categories, information, and other variables. And internet recruiting also can save time of the employers, and it also can help recruiters to reach passive job seeker. And the passive job seekers is those who have a good job and are not really looking to change jobs, but who might consider it if a better opportunity were presented to them. And the disadvantages of the internet recruiting method is that it sometimes often creates additional work for HR staff members and others internally in an organization. And more online job postings must be sent, and many more resumes must be reviewed, since many more people can apply for the job, and more emails, blogs, and Twitters need to be dealt with, and expensive specialized software may be needed to track the increased number of applicants resulting from internet recruiting efforts. And another issue with internet recruiting method is that some applicants may have limited internet access, especially those individuals who come from lower socioeconomic groups and from certain racial or ethnic groups that have not already got the internet. And in addition, many individuals who access internet recruiting sources are browsers who may submit resumes just to see what happens when they submit it, but they actually are not actively looking for a new job. And there are external recruiting sources, and they are first media sources. Second external recruiting sources is the competitive recruiting sources. The third one is employment agencies. 4 labor unions, 5 job fairs and creative recruiting, and the last one is educational institutions and recruiting. So those 6 things are the external recruiting sources. And there are some advantages of it. The first one is that new resources brings new perspective to the company, and training new hires may be cheaper and faster because of prior external experience, and new hires are likely to have fewer internal political supporters inside of the firm, inside of the new firm. And the last is new hires may bring new industry insights and expertise. But there are also some disadvantages of these external recruiting sources, such as the firm may not select someone who will fit well with the job and the organization, and the process may cause moral problems for internal candidates who are not selected, and new employees may require longer adjustment periods as well as the orientation efforts to the new employees. And those are the disadvantages of the external recruiting sources. And I am going to talk about the sexual harassment. This is actually the part of the EO chapter. So sexual harassment is actually the actions that are sexually directed, are unwanted, and subject the worker to adverse employment conditions or create a hostile work environment. And it actually affects the performance in a company by decreasing company's productivity. Because sexual harassment is also damaging to an organization. When a workplace is infected with discrimination and harassment, everyone in that company would suffer. And the hostility created by harassment causes absenteeism, low morale, gossip, animosity, stress, and anxiety among the staffs. And low productivity is more common in environments with high rates of sexual harassment. So it actually really affects the productivity of the people inside of the firm. And victims and witnesses of the sexual harassments are more likely to quit the job, and leading to high employee turnover and related hiring and training cost increases. And then last, a toxic environment will also make recruiting top talent becomes more difficult in the future. And there are several factors why sexual harassment can happen at workplace, such as the unprofessional work environment, the school-in-gender ratio, and the workplace, the sexist attitudes among the employees, and the privacy issue in the workplace. And there are two types of workplace sexual harassment. The first one is quid pro quo sexual harassment, which occurs when an employee's supervisor, manager, or other authority figure offers or suggests that an employee will be given something, such as a raise or promotion or prize or gifts in exchange for some sort of sexual favor. And the second type of sexual harassment is the hostile work environment, which is the type of sexual harassment that has the effect of unreasonably interfering with a victim's work performance or creating an intimidating, hostile, or offensive working environment that affects the victim's psychological well-being. And then now I'm going to talk about the human resource planning. So human resource planning is basically the process of analyzing and identifying the need for and availability of human resource so that the organization can meet its objectives. And in planning my human resource, if I become a manager one day, I would follow the 4 general steps in the human resource planning process. They are first identifying the current supply of employees, and then determining the future of the workforce, and balancing between labor supply and demand. And the fourth or the last is developing plans that support the company's goals. And there are some efforts that made to retain the best people in my company. And the first one is I have to know my company's mission. Okay, I'm sorry because there was a problem with my camera, so I'm going to continue explaining about the efforts that I can do to retain best people in my company. The first one is I have to know my company's mission and values. So identifying the most important skills and values for my company is really important. Then I can fill the positions around those needs instead of just hiring one employee to replace another one. And then the second one, or the second effort to retain the good people in my company, is I have to build an employee-focused culture. So I can consider what I can offer to the employees, and employees value work-life balance, and when they have the good work-life balance, then they can appreciate it when I offer flexible work schedules, for example. And the candidates and employees also appreciate career opportunities like on-the-job training and potential promotions, or like the developing skills of them. And then the third one that I can do to retain good people in my company is I have to involve the employees in a recruiting method. And we have to note that happy employees usually stay longer in a company, so they also help me attract top talent by showing the best potential hires that they also could be happy at my business. And then there's a term, psychological contract. It actually refers to individuals' expectations, beliefs, ambitions, and obligations in a company as perceived by the employer and the worker. And the psychological contract can create either a positive or negative relationship between an employer and an individual. And it is actually based on trust and commitment that leads to meeting both the employers and the employees' expectations and needs. And the psychological contract is really important in an organization because individual psychological contracts allow the employee to see their value and role within the business, and it also helps both sides of the employer and the employees to avoid creating unrealistic expectations of one another. And it also allows for amending the terms of the contract if needed, which is done through regular communications. And there are several components that are included in psychological contract. The first one is from the employers provide. So employers can provide competitive compensation and benefits to their employees. And employers can also provide flexibility to balance work and home life, and also career development opportunities to the employers. But the employees should also contribute continuous skill improvement and increased productivity, and the employees should also contribute reasonable time with the organization and extra efforts and results when needed by the organization. So now I'm going to talk about the human resource planning. How does it work? So it works by ensuring the best fit between employees and the jobs while avoiding manpower shortages and surpluses. And there are 4 key steps to the human resource planning process. They include first analyzing present labor and supply, and then forecasting labor demand, balancing projected labor demand and supply, and supporting organizational goals. And then there are 3 videos that I have already watched. So I'm going to talk about the first video first. So this first video is about the 3 methods of recruitment process. So the first method is the IQ test, or General Mental Ability, or GMA test. It is actually the most well-validated concept in social sciences, and it shows how successful you are in your work. And the interesting thing about this IQ test is that it is indicated 2 things. The first one is it shows how quickly a candidate can learn a job, and the second one, IQ test, predicts how successful a candidate will be in their job. And the IQ test actually can predict 26% of the applicant's performance. And the second method that is used is the unstructured employment interviews. So this is the way we do the interviews to the applicants. And the way we structure the interview can have a big impact on how effective the interview is. But according to the latest analysis, this method only predicts roughly about 14% of the applicants' performance in their job in the future. And the structure one, which is the third method, predicts 26%. So the structure one is actually more recommended to use in your company when you are about to recruit your new employees. So, but actually we should use both kind of structured and unstructured interviews. And the unstructured one can gain more bias during the interview because the questions are not the same with the other applicants. And the structured one is the second highest predictor of future performance of the applicants because they are interviewed with the same questions and criteria, which will lead to less bias during the interview than the unstructured one. And from this first video, I learned that we cannot just depend on one method to decide whether the applicant is good or not to our company, but we still have to combine all the recruitment methods that are available. Okay, sorry, there was a problem again with my camera, and now I'm going to continue explaining about the second video. So the second video is about the recruitment process, and there are several steps in doing the recruitment process. The first step is to defining the role. So we have to think about what the role is and the actual requirements of the job and how it fits with our business and our future plans. And we can write the job description about the task and the responsibility, and it is also about the job, not the person. So we have to remind ourselves that this is about the job, not about the person. And the second step is to build the profile of the ideal person to fill the role of the job. So a person's specification can help us to undertake the selection and interview process in a systematic way. The third step in doing the recruitment process is by attracting applicants. So we need to start the search for suitable candidates. We can advertise the job requirement, and this is particularly important for small and new business because the company name may not be particularly well known. So we should keep the advertisement short and straight to the point, and pay attention to the EEO, pay attention to the things that can be sensitive to some people. And the fourth step in doing the recruitment process is by selecting the right candidate. So we can draw up our selection criteria first, because this is a great idea to create a checklist based on the essential and desirable skills that we need and experience required. So we can use this to assess how closely candidate is matched up with the job and person specification that we want in the first place. And from this second video, I learned that a recruiter must be someone who is well trained about the equality and diversity issues, and we have to take care of interview process and make sure that every applicant get the same opportunity in showing the best version of themselves during the interview process. And then I also have already watched the third video. So the third video is about the sexual harassment in the workplace, how to recognize it, the establishing procedures to report it, and how to prevent it. So there is a data that is since 2010 based on the data from the United States Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. There are more than 7,000 sexual harassment charges that have been filed with the agency each year. And the first step in preventing sexual harassment is by establishing a zero tolerance policy that clearly states that no form of sexual harassment is accepted in that company. And not only sexual harassment, but also other kinds of harassments such as the race, religion, ethnic background, age, or disability harassment. And then we have to offer employees the training in how to recognize harassment and make sure that they understand what kind of actions and behaviors that can be considered as sexual harassment, and what kind of actions or behaviors that cannot be considered as sexual harassment. And then we also have to pay attention to kind of things that are considered as sexual harassment in the workplace, so that when we are facing sexual harassments, we can file the case to the court or things like that, etc. And from this third video, I learned that the most efficient solution to the problem of sexual harassment, or even the other harassments in the workplace, is to prevent it in the first place. Okay, so the fourth video, so there are 4 links in the documents, but the fourth video is actually just the same video as the second video, so I'm not going to talk about it again because it is actually just the same video. And those are all the answers, my answers to the midterm exam of HRM from chapter 1 to chapter 6 with the lecturer Mr. Adi Mursalin. Thank you for watching.